My daughter-in-law thought moving into my house meant taking it over my kitchen, my money, even my rules. But she forgot one thing: the house belonged to me. The keys belonged to me. And I had no intention of going down without a fight. My son, Garrett, thought I needed the company after my husband passed away 2 years ago. He suggested that he and his wife, Kendra, move into my spacious suburban home outside of Chicago. I agreed because the place is plenty big and has a fully finished walkout basement apartment. But on day 1, Kendra was already standing in my kitchen, boxing up my favorite coffee mugs to take to the basement. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "We need to modernize this place. Mom, it's my house now." Garrett just stood there, staring down at his phone, completely silent. In that exact moment, I didn't feel anger, just a profound, icy clarity. They had barely unpacked their bags, and they were already trying to dictate the rules. Kendra left moving boxes scattered all over the hallway, blocked my path to the backyard garden, and reorganized the refrigerator according to her own strict preferences. My favorite spot by the window, where I always drank my morning tea, was suddenly buried under her fashion magazines. She didn't see me as her hostess. She saw me as an old woman who needed to clear out of the way. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't yell. I just watched as Garrett shamefully looked away when his wife referred to my antique oak dining table as garage sale junk. They probably thought a 65-year-old widow would just quietly submit to her fate to keep the family peace. But my husband and I built this life together, brick by brick, and my name is the only one on the deed. My savings account belongs to me. And the patience of a woman who spent decades climbing the corporate ladder has very clear boundaries. When Kendra announced that evening that she was planning a massive party in my living room next Saturday, I just nodded silently. She believed she had conquered the territory without firing a shot. She had no idea that over dinner, I had already decided to play the game by my own rules. The first step was small, but it was definitive. The very next morning, I went to the local hardware store and bought a heavy-duty, secure deadbolt for my upstairs bedroom door. While Kendra and Garrett were still fast asleep, I mounted it using my late husband's cordless drill. When Kendra marched up the stairs around 11 to tell me I needed to pet sit her cat for the weekend, she found herself staring at a locked door. I opened it just a crack. "This is my private space," I said calmly. "Please knock first from now on." She stared at me, completely flabbergasted, forced a tight smile, and said, "Come on, we're family. We don't need secrets." I shut the door without giving her a reply. At lunch, I noticed that Garrett had paid for their entire weekly grocery haul using my money by swiping the authorized user card I'd given him for emergencies. Kendra had loaded the cart with pricey organic delicacies and expensive bottles of wine. After lunch, I drove down to my local bank branch. I canceled Garrett's card on the spot and moved my funds into a separate account where only my retirement pension was deposited. When the two of them tried to order a new couch online that evening, the card declined. Garrett rushed into my kitchen, visibly panicked. "Mom, something's wrong with the card. Kendra was trying to buy a sofa." I took a slow sip of my tea. "I canceled the card. Garrett, you both make good livings. From here on out, we split the utility bills and groceries 3 ways." Kendra stood in the doorway, her face turning pale with rage. She had fully expected my life savings to bankroll their new lifestyle. But I had no intention of sacrificing my financial security for her luxury tastes. The next day, I took the next step. Because Kendra wasn't the type to back down easily. Kendra shifted gears. Resorting to the classic silent treatment and passive-aggressive behavior, she started cooking dinner only for herself and Garrett, leaving the dirty pots and pans piling up in the sink for days. She probably figured I would eventually snap and clean it up because she knew I loved a tidy house. But she severely underestimated my discipline. I went out and bought myself a single, high-quality set, 1 pot, 1 pan, and 1 plate. I cooked my own meals, washed my dishes immediately, and kept them upstairs in my locked apartment. I didn't touch a single piece of the dirty dishware downstairs. By the 4th day, the kitchen was starting to smell, and Garrett finally complained to his wife. Kendra screamed at him, telling him to stop being a baby. When she cornered me in the hallway on Friday, she said through gritted teeth, "You could at least help out around the house, since you just sit around doing nothing all day." I looked her right in the eye. I don't sit around. I am enjoying my retirement, and I only clean up the messes that I make. That same afternoon, I took back control of the laundry room. It was located in the basement area that belonged to my side of the layout. I changed the lock on that door, too. When Kendra walked down with a basket of dirty clothes, she found herself locked out. She pounded furiously on my door. "What is this? I need to do laundry," she yelled. I opened the door calmly. "There's a great laundromat by the grocery store about 2 miles down the road. You can use that." Losing control over something so basic left her completely shaken. Garrett sat on the living room couch, not daring to defend his wife or talk back to me. They were slowly realizing that their words had absolutely no power here. Saturday night arrived, and Kendra had invited 8 of her friends over for her planned party. She had entirely rearranged and decorated my downstairs living room without asking for my permission even once. When her guests started arriving around 8 in the evening, I was sitting comfortably in my armchair in the middle of the room, reading a novel. Kendra glided over to me and hissed under her breath, "Could you please go up to your room? We'd like some privacy." I didn't even look up from my page. "The living room is a part of my house. Kendra, I read here every Saturday night. Your friends don't bother me, as long as they're polite." Kendra's friends instantly looked incredibly uncomfortable as they picked up on the thick tension in the room. I was perfectly polite. I greeted every single one of them and even offered them a slice of the homemade apple pie I had baked that afternoon. The guests sat down, but the conversation was stiff and awkward. Kendra tried to force a party atmosphere by cranking up the Bluetooth speaker. I simply stood up, walked over to the dial, and turned the volume down to a reasonable level. The neighbors keep strict quiet hours around here, and we don't want any complaints. I told the room with a smile. Kendra was absolutely boiling with rage, but she couldn't throw a tantrum in front of her friends. The rest of the night was incredibly subdued. When the guests finally left at 11, Kendra left all the empty glasses and bottles scattered across the tables and marched upstairs to bed to make a point. She assumed I would clean it up Sunday morning, but I had already laid the groundwork for a plan that would permanently shift the balance of power. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. on Sunday morning at exactly 7 o'clock. I started cleaning up the living room, but I didn't wash a single one of Kendra's glasses. I packed every dirty plate, empty wine bottle, and leftover napkin into a large plastic bin and set it right outside their bedroom door. Next, I called a friendly neighbor, and together we brought my beloved solid oak furniture back inside from the garage where Garrett had stashed it. We carefully but deliberately moved Kendra's modern, white minimalist vases and throw pillows out into the hallway, stacking them neatly right next to their door. When Kendra opened her door at 9 and nearly tripped over the bin of crusty dishes, she let out a screech. A sleepy Garrett stumbled out behind her. "What is going on out here?" he demanded. I was standing in my spotless kitchen, peacefully sipping my coffee. I put the living room back the way it belongs, I said casually. Your things are by your door, and your party trash is waiting for you right there, too. Kendra stormed into the kitchen, her cheeks flushed bright red. This is completely out of line. We live here too. This is supposed to be our space. I set my coffee mug down on the counter. You live in the basement apartment and use the common areas solely by my good graces. You don't pay a dime in rent, so you don't get to dictate the decor. Garrett tried to play peacemaker. Mom, please. Kendra was just trying to modernize the place. I looked directly at my son. Garrett, you didn't build this house. If you want to provide a modern home for your wife, you need to go buy one or rent one yourself. Kendra realized that her emotional manipulation wasn't going to work on me. She didn't say a word for the rest of Sunday, but I knew she was already looking for a new loophole. At Quiet Revenge, we share stories about family, betrayal, resilience, loss, and the quiet strength people find when life tests them. We want to be transparent with you. AI tools may assist with certain parts of our creative process, but every story is carefully selected, reviewed, edited, and produced by our team before it reaches this channel. Human judgment, care, and responsibility remain at the heart of what we do. Because our channel's monetization is currently limited, viewer support helps us continue creating these stories for our community. If Quiet Revenge has brought you comfort, reflection, or companionship, please consider supporting us with the cost of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/quietrevengemafamily. Ko-fi, https://keo-fi.com/thestreetfamily. PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/paypalm/kanhuangmin. Thank you for being part of this journey. On Monday evening, a printed document was waiting on the kitchen island. It wasn't a legal notice. It was a simple, business-like breakdown of the monthly utility bills and a standard house-sharing agreement that I had drafted myself. When Garrett and Kendra walked in from work, I asked them to take a seat. Since you've been here for a month now and the costs for heating, trash pickup, and high-speed internet have spiked, here is your required monthly contribution, I said, sliding the paper across the counter. Kendra let out a mocking laugh. We are not paying rent to Garrett's own mother, Garrett. Say something. Garrett scanned the numbers. It was a completely fair amount, exactly 1/3 of the actual household expenses, plus a small fee for the wear and tear of the shared spaces. This is fair, Kendra, Garrett said quietly. Kendra looked at him with absolute disdain. You are so weak, she spat. Then she whipped around to face me. And what if we don't pay? You can't just kick us out into the street. We're family. I remained entirely unbothered. If you don't pay, I will be changing the Wi-Fi password on the 1st of the month, since the account is solely in my name. I will also be turning down the thermostat in the basement unit to the legal minimum. I have to manage my budget if I'm carrying the financial weight alone. Kendra stared at me. She finally understood that I wasn't making empty threats. I was acting out of pure, cold logic. I wasn't giving her any ammunition for a dramatic blow-up because I wasn't yelling, and I wasn't crying. I was just laying out the consequences. The very next day, $500 for the first month was deposited into my account. But Kendra was already planning her next move. And this time, she was using Garrett to do it. 2 days later, Garrett cornered me for a private conversation while Kendra was out at the gym. He looked incredibly anxious, refusing to meet my eyes. Mom, he started. staring down at his hands. Kendra feels like she isn't welcome here. She thinks this house is way too big for just one person. Could we maybe put our names on the deed? If we owned half the house, she'd feel secure enough for us to start investing in renovating the property together. I felt a pang of deep sorrow for my son, but I didn't let my guard down for a second. Garrett, I said gently but firmly, this house is my retirement security. Your father and I worked ourselves to the bone for it. It will be yours one day when I'm gone. But as long as I am alive, the ownership stays entirely with me. Garrett sighed heavily. She says, you're being selfish. I offered a small, knowing smile. It isn't selfish to protect your independence. Garrett, what's selfish is demanding a stake in a 65-year-old widow's property without having contributed a single dollar to it. Right then, I heard the front door click open. Kendra had obviously been listening or hoping Garrett would come back with good news. When she saw the defeated look on his face, she completely lost her composure. Still stubborn as a mule? I see, she muttered loudly as she brushed past us into the hall. I didn't bother responding to the insult. Words fade, but actions stick. I walked up to my room and retrieved the master ring of house keys that I used to keep on a hook by the front door. From that moment on, they stayed in my purse. They had proven they had zero respect for my boundaries. So I had to tighten my physical control over my property. The final breaking point was looming. On Friday afternoon, I got back from running errands and found a contractor working inside my house without my permission. Kendra had hired him to permanently wall off the interior doorway, connecting the main house to the basement unit. Attempting to turn it into a completely separate apartment, but doing so would have entirely blocked my access to my own basement utility room. The contractor looked incredibly uncomfortable standing there in the hallway. I walked right up to him. "Hello, sir," I said politely. "I am the sole owner of this property. I did not authorize this work. I need to ask you to pack up your tools and leave my property immediately. I will gladly reimburse you for your trip out here." The contractor didn't argue. He packed up his gear and walked out the door. Kendra came storming out of the living room, her face practically purple with rage. "This is the absolute last straw. You sabotage every single thing I try to do. It is unlivable, sharing a roof with you," she screamed at me. Garrett stood like a statue in the background, entirely paralyzed. I turned to look at Kendra. My voice was quiet, but it was absolute ice. "Kendra, you're exactly right. It is unlivable, which is why I am giving you both exactly 4 weeks to find your own apartment. Your housing agreement is officially terminated." Kendra let out a hysterical laugh. "You can't just throw us out. Garrett lives here too." I turned my gaze directly to my son. "Garrett, you are my son and I love you, but you are a grown man. If you choose to live with a woman who disrespects and manipulates me in my own home, you are going to have to do it somewhere else." Garrett looked at me, and for the very first time, he realized that I was completely serious. There was no going back. The next 4 weeks passed in near total silence. Kendra intentionally ignored the move-out deadline. She kept buying groceries like normal and acted as though nothing had happened, likely assuming that when moving day arrived, I would lose my nerve. She figured a mother would never actually lock her own son out. On the final Saturday of the month, the two of them packed a bag to spend a long weekend visiting Kendra's parents out of town. It was the exact opportunity I had been preparing for. 2 weeks prior, I had purchased a brand new electronic smart lock system for the front door. The moment their car cleared the driveway, I got to work and replaced the entire lock assembly on the main entrance. I took all of Kendra's personal items that were still lingering in the shared upstairs spaces and packed them neatly into heavy-duty moving boxes. I didn't touch a single piece of furniture or clothing down in their basement apartment. But the interior door leading from their unit into my main living quarters was now locked tight. I carried their moving boxes out to the detached garage, stacked them safely away from the elements, and locked the garage door. On Sunday evening, their car pulled back up. I sat quietly by the upstairs window, watching through the blinds as Kendra tried to punch her code into the new lock and insert her old key. It wouldn't budge. She rattled the handle violently. Garrett tried his key next, with the exact same result. They began pounding loudly on the glass panes. I slid the upstairs window open and looked down at them. Your packing boxes are safely stored in the garage, and the key to the garage pad is inside the mailbox, I said calmly. You can rent a moving truck next weekend to clear out the basement furniture. I will be here to unlock the door and supervise. Kendra shrieked up at the window. This is illegal. You can't just lock us out. I didn't give her an answer. I slowly closed the window and pulled the curtains shut. It was finally over. There was no major blowout, no dramatic legal battles, and no calls to the authorities. The following Saturday, Garrett pulled up to the house alone in a rented U-Haul truck. Kendra remained in the passenger seat of their car outside the front gate, staring straight ahead and refusing to even look in my direction. Garrett worked in total silence, carrying the remaining bedroom furniture out of the basement. When he finished loading the last box, he walked back up to the kitchen, where I had set out a cold glass of water for him. He looked exhausted, but the immense weight of the past few months seemed to have lifted from his shoulders. We signed a lease on a small 2-bedroom apartment downtown, he said quietly. I gave him a supportive nod. That's wonderful. Garrett, you two need to build a life that is entirely your own. He looked at me with a soft, hesitant expression. Are you mad at me, Mom? I reached over and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. No, Garrett, I love you. You are always welcome to come back and visit, but you will visit as a guest who respects the rules of my home. He took a deep breath, finished his water, and said goodbye. Since that afternoon, peace and quiet have returned to my home. The rich aroma of fresh coffee fills the rooms every morning, and my antique oak table sits exactly where it belongs by the window. I won back my peace of mind, not through endless arguments or messy confrontations, but through quiet, decisive actions. Kendra learned firsthand that growing older does not mean becoming weak. When I sit out in the garden now, watering my flowers in the afternoon sun, I don't feel a single ounce of bitterness, only a deep, comforting sense of satisfaction. I protected my home, and I kept my dignity. My life belongs to me again, and every locked door brought with it a beautiful, new beginning. At Quiet Revenge, we share stories about family, betrayal, resilience, loss, and the quiet strength people find when life tests them. We want to be transparent with you. AI tools may assist with certain parts of our creative process, but every story is carefully selected, reviewed, edited, and produced by our team before it reaches this channel. Human judgment, care, and responsibility remain at the heart of what we do. Because our channel's monetization is currently limited, viewer support helps us continue creating these stories for our community. If Quiet Revenge has brought you comfort, reflection, or companionship, please consider supporting us with the cost of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/quiet revenge family. Ko-fi, https://ko-fi.com/thehistory family. PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/paypalm/kunhwangmin. Thank you for being part of this journey.